Okay, so we're recording now, and for this video I want to go through the setup and configuring of a router for the College of Art, Technology and Science as an example, Hobart campus. We're going to look at replacing this router here for this section of the network. We don't need to look at covering everything in here. What we're doing is setting up a router as a virtual machine conceptually. So it's for testing purposes, and you're using VMware Workstation to test, to install, test and configure a IPFire firewall router appliance. So just so you know, that's the item here that we intend on replacing. So you should have some idea of IP addressing that you plan to be using for the different networks. And we're actually going to set up 3 separate networks in the College of Art, Technology of Science. We're choosing to use IPFire, and the latest edition of IPFire is available for download, and you can look up some additional information on IPFire if you go to the ipfire.org. There are features, support, there's a blog, community and downloads. In the blog I've noticed that for IPFire 2.27 core, update 164, so that's the stable version. We're not looking at the testing version, we're just looking at the stable version. Then I noticed some information on this is, and it's important for us when we set it up, we have a new kernel for IPFire. So it's just worth noting that when we set up the virtual machine, that this is a Linux kernel 5. So it's a 64-bit operating system. And you can go to the support section of IPFire, and I have to say that the support section is a little bit Mickey Mouse in that it's fairly basic, rudimentary, I'd have to say. It's pretty straightforward and easy to find stuff, but there's just not a lot here. But we've got some information about what is IPFire, the installation, internet connection, setup, hardware, and so on and so forth. So feel free to go there and have a look at that information. Let's just get stuck into installing and configuring. So the first thing I'm going to do is edit my virtual networks in VMware Workstation to suit the network environment for my router. And it may be interesting for you to have a look at this if you haven't done this already. And I need to be a little bit careful with because I'm recording this at the moment, I'm also streaming my screen, that some of these things may actually stop what I'm doing here. So we'll just have to keep an eye on that. Okay, so with our virtual network editor here, as you've already seen before, we've got a bridged network. The bridged network is auto bridging. If you have multiple network adapters, you can certainly select a specific adapter for the bridged network, and then in your networks that you connect to a virtual machine, you can just connect VMnet 0 and know that it'll always use that specific adapter. That's brilliant. VMnet 1 is by default a host-only adapter, and VMnet 8 is a NAT adapter. For my setup, I prefer to get rid of the NAT adapter, and in fact, I like to then add an additional network called the VMnet 2, and then I would like to rename that network. And I'm going to call that network Cats LAN. Because we're using the College of Arts, Technology and Science, and this will be the LAN, the local area network. So I'll go ahead and make another network, because we need 3 network adapters in total for the CATS testing environment. So I'll rename that one, and I'll call that CATS DMZ, short for demilitarized zone, and that'll be the area that will install and test what do we call it, mail servers, web servers, and so on and so forth. And then I'll actually go and uncheck the VMnet 1. Well, when I say uncheck, you can remove the adapters from here in the DHCP scope so that it doesn't communicate with the local machine, or in fact it might be worth knowing that you can't rename that, so that's why I created 2 new ones. Other than that, I don't need it, so I can just remove that network. You can only rename VMnet adapters 2 and beyond, which is quite interesting. So we've got our bridged network. That's the network that any virtual machine connecting to will have access to the internet. Then we've got a LAN, and I'm going to untick the host adapter for this network and local DHCP. So it is an internal private network only, and I'll do the same for the demilitarized zone. We do not want either of these 2 networks to communicate with the classroom network or the physical machine in any way, shape or form. So without at least our explicit consent or use of our firewall appliance for routing and using whatever rules we set up. So that's keeping that completely separate to everything. So I'll just go ahead and apply those settings. Now that we've created our virtual network adapters, we can see that in our computer systems adapters, we don't have any of those virtual adapters connected. We've only got the bridged Ethernet adapter so that we can access the internet ourselves, and that's a good thing. So let's start with the creation of a virtual machine suitable for IPFire. We've already had a look at the requirements, minimum system requirements for IPFire, and just call you back to the website again where you get that information. So we'll go ahead and create a pretty standard virtual machine using custom settings. It's a Linux, and we're using another Linux 5 kernel, 64-bit, and we'll give it a name. So let's call it the CATS IPFire, and a location. So I like to put mine, and remember that this is for testing purposes. So virtual machines, I'll make a new folder in here. Just so I keep everything tidy and I know where everything lives. I only need 1 processor, and I might give it a dual core. You only need a single core. I'll give it a dual core because I'm feeling generous, and I'll give it 2 gig of RAM because I'm feeling generous as well. And I'll just select to use bridged networking because the first adapter will be your what we'll call the red or external network adapter. We'll talk more about the network design for IPFire shortly. We can keep the default settings for pretty much everything else. I always like to store the virtual disk as a single file because I'm not storing on FAT32 file system, and it's a very small file anyway. 8 gig is more than enough, generally speaking. So when that starts there, or not starts, when it creates there, I can go in and edit and add the ISO image file. So I downloaded one earlier, and I'll make this available, or you can jump on the internet and download. It's very small anyway. We've got bridged network adapter, and again, as I said, because we've already determined which adapter that bridged one uses, I can select VMnet 0 there from that list, and then I can click add, and I can click new network adapter, and I'll select the CATS LAN, and then I'll click add again and select a network adapter, and then I can select CATS DMZ. So that's pretty much got the ISO covered, the external adapter and the LAN adapter internal and the demilitarized zone internal. There's some other things you can get rid of if you don't want to, like the USB controller, for instance. Sound card, don't need a printer. It doesn't matter, you can leave them there. And I know I'm running through this really quickly, but I guess that's the beauty of recording the video. So now that we've got that done, we'll click power onto the virtual machine and we'll wait for the virtual machine to start up, and we'll try and speed this up a little bit. If there's any long waiting processes, I'm going to click pause on the recording while I'm waiting for anything. Other than that, I'll just crack on. So you navigate once you've captured your mouse in VMware Workstation, you navigate through the settings using your tab, arrows and enter key and spacebar. They're the main keys you can use here. So I'll select English, start installation. I'll navigate to accept this license, press the spacebar, navigate to OK, enter. Delete all data, keep the default settings there for the file system. It'll partition the disk, and then we'll move on to the next step. If you need to release your mouse from being captured, you press Control-Alt on your keyboard. That releases your mouse. To recapture your mouse again, just click in that window. Brilliant. So now we'll reboot IPFire as it's installed, and then we can go through the setup process. Right, so we've now rebooted, and we can go into the setup configuration. We're going to select a US keyboard. I'll change to my time zone location, which is Australia Hobart, and we'll give the machine a host name. And a domain name. For testing purposes, a password. This password is for the root user interface. So that's when you're accessing IPFire via shell. And then we've got an admin password, which should be different from your root password for security reasons. And this password is how you the password that you'll use for the admin when you're accessing the web administration page. Now we'll set up our network configuration, because we need 3 network adapters, a green, red and orange. Green is for a local area network. That's the colour that is chosen for the local area network or internal LAN. The red is the interface that is chosen for the external network, and red is the colour for warning or stop. The orange is a beware sort of colour, and it is designed for the demilitarized zone internal LAN as well. And the reason that we have the 3, because we want to separate the 3 networks. We want 2 internal networks and 1 external, but we don't want the green talking with the orange, because we want some normal devices such as workstations and so on the green or local area network, and we want some web servers and mail servers and things like that that the internet will access as a service resource, without having them accessing anything in the local network there, for security reasons. If we chose a green, red, orange and blue, the blue is generally used for wireless networks. So we'll go to drivers and card assignments, and here's where you don't know what cards you're using. So let's select the green one first. And we've got 3 network adapters to choose from. They're all the same network adapter, but they have different MAC addresses. So all we have to do is right click on our virtual machine, go to settings and look up our green network, the network that we want to be on the green network, which is our CATS LAN, and click advanced, and we can see that what the MAC address is there. So once you know what the MAC address is there, then you can select the appropriate adapter for that, and you can't go wrong. We'll do the same for the red. So we'll go over again and we'll look at the settings, and we'll click VMnet 0, advanced, and we'll find the MAC address, and then we'll go in there and select the correct adapter for that. And then we'll go to the orange. We don't need to look that one up. It can't be any others except for the one that's left. So let's click done on there and go down to the address settings. The green is the address settings that you are choosing to use for your CATS network here. Now, I don't know what IP address ranges and so on you are choosing. Nothing to do with me. So I'm going to go ahead and need my numlock on there. I'm going to go ahead and just choose a network address, an IP address for that green network. And the orange and the red, I'm going to choose DHCP for the red. Because like what you would do when we're connecting to an NBN, we may actually have a DHCP assigned address at this point, or it could be a WAN address assigned. It depends on how we're connecting. But because I'm using a virtual machine for testing purposes only, then I'm going to select what I know that my virtual machine is connecting to, which is connecting to a DHCP network, and it's a local network. We're not using a WAN address here for this purpose. So that's just worth knowing. Otherwise, you won't have internet access for any of your machines. So we'll click done on that, and then done again. And I will enable DHCP. DHCP will only work for the green network, or CATS LAN. So we'll have a start address and an end address. Now, I'm going to change the DNS here because we are in a situation where we have a DNS server's IP address that is different. We're not going to use our IPFire gateway firewall appliance as a DNS server. So I'm just going to select the next DNS server upstream. And we'll wait for that to complete and start up. So we've rebooted after setting up. If we want to log back in here, we can log in as root, and we can use that super secure password that we used. If we need to go back into the setup, we just type setup. Or if we want to just check adapters, ifconfig and the adapter name. Or if you don't know the adapter name, you can just type ifconfig. If you do know the names are written there. You can do an ifconfig, and then you might want to look at red 0, for instance, just for that one adapter, and then you can see what IP address it is. You will need to know that IP address, so it's good to have a look at that. Now, we need to start up a Windows 10 virtual machine. So the first thing you need to do is just to make sure that you've selected the CATS LAN on the virtual machine, the Windows client virtual machine, so that you can be a member of that network. Right, so that booted up, and I'll log in here. And one of the first things we want to do is to click yes for our new network that pops up there for the firewall location rules that come up. It's not strictly required. And we want to then test that we have access to a couple of things, such as internet, and I like to check the command prompt to see if we've got an IP address from our IPFire, which we do, and if we have access to a DNS server, and if we can resolve a name such as Google. So all of that should be good. and we can ping Google. So that should mean to me that I should be able to open up Edge browser and Google or Bing Google. Is that even a thing? There we go. I just binged Google. So that's brilliant. Right. Now that we've done that, we need to access IPFire web interface. And we can do that on the local internal network. And admin is the username. And here we are. So we've got our IP address for the red interface. catsipfire.cats.local is the host name. Brilliant. That's it's actually not a host name, sorry. Host name's cats-ipfire. The .cats.local is the appended domain name, so it's a fully qualified domain name there. The gateway address that it's using, the LAN address, the demilitarized zone address. So if we wanted to make some changes in our menu items along the top, you can do things like go to your DHCP server and you can make changes to the DHCP server. Let's say your DHCP server wasn't working, for instance. So how would you fix that? You would need to statically set your network to an IP address in the range of your IPFire, and then you could access your IPFire. Then you could turn the DHCP off here, make your changes, turn it back on and save it, and then you could release and renew your IP address for testing purposes. So that's good, and that should work okay. The main thing that we're going to look at here today is the firewall. And if we look at our firewall rules, we don't have any rules. So the thing that I want to stress to you is that out of the box, the firewall is in fact in such a state that it actually allows most things. So you can see that I can access the internet and without any restriction. And in fact, I'm going to turn on a web server that I half prepared, and it's just a turnkey web server. I've downloaded this, and you can have access to this as a turnkey open virtualization appliance, and all you do realistically is start it up. And when it starts up, you probably have to put in a password. Make sure it's on the CATS DMZ network. So this one goes on the demilitarized zone network. So it won't be connected at all. And I need to go into I'm not sure how, oops. Hold on one moment, please. So we want to go to the advanced menu. If you get stuck out of here, you just you'd log in as root and you type in conf console. It says that on the screen if I had have spent 5 minutes looking before. Go into the advanced menu and you can change your network settings. And you need a static IP address. And the IP address there, that's for my green network. So I'm going to change that to my orange network. And the orange network, just so that to remind you, is 10.10.10.1 is the gateway address. So we need something in that network range, and we need that as the gateway address for it. So we'll go numlock 10.10.10.10. Brilliant. We'll get rid of that gateway and we'll put in 10.10.10.1. And the name server can be also an upstream name server. You actually can't use IPFire as a name server on that orange network anyway. So you always have to use a DNS server further upstream. We'll apply that setting, and that should be pretty much done. So should be able to test that now by going back into my Windows client virtual machine that's on the cat's LAN and just typing in the IP address of the web server. So I'm going here. I'm going straight from the LAN, a client on the LAN, to a client in the demilitarized zone without any firewall rules at all. So I'm going to now change the firewall behavior, and what I will do is look at the default firewall behavior for forwarding. The forwarding sets the default behavior for connections from local networks, and you may either allow all new connections or block them by default. So connections between the local networks are also blocked in the latter mode. So that means that once I block it, I won't be able to do this by default. And incidentally, at the moment, if I was to try to access this website from external or outside of this environment, I won't be able to either. And I'll need to do that eventually shortly. So what I'll do is I'll change that to blocked and click save. And just to make sure, I've clicked both saves there. The outgoing rule, we'll leave that as allowed. We're just going to block this forwarding behavior. And some options need a reboot to take effect. So let's go ahead and do a reboot on the IPFire machine. So now that that's rebooted, I'll just make sure that those firewall options actually stuck, and they did. So after a reboot, that should say blocked there, and you still won't have any firewall rules. But let's just go over to our cat's website that's still running, and I'll right click and I'll refresh it. And that's what should happen. You just should get the looking, and not receiving. So if you want to make sure, just close it and open up a new tab and type in the IP address again, and nothing will happen. And that's exactly what should happen now. So the default rules are, so we've timed out. So the default rules are, in fact, that we've secured our router considerably, because now what happens is that we need to make rules. So let's have a look at we'll just make sure to see if we can Google things. Can't reach this page, so we can't even Google anything. So that's brilliant, isn't it? So, right, okay, let's go and configure this. Now, there's a couple of ways of doing this, and I'll show you the basic rules first, and then we'll go and have a look at some other ways of dealing with it, or better ways of dealing with it. So let's create a new rule so that we can see the effect of a rule. Let's, for instance, let's see if we can get access to our web server locally. Now, to do that, we can select the source. And the source in this case is our green network, or it could be this machine as an individual, or it could be the entire network. So let's go green. So we're going to say everything on green wants to be able to access either everything on orange or a specific IP address, which is what we want to do by here. We want to go 10, 10, 10, 10. We want to say that the green network can access that one IP address. And this is for testing purposes only. If we wanted to be a little bit more secure, what we would do is specify a host machine here only, like an admin machine. So let's just do this loose rule here now so we can see an effect, and then we'll go and change it. So we'll select the protocol, and we will select the destination port, and we'll say we're going to accept it, and then we're going to select a remark, LAN to demilitarized zone HTTP. And we'll just click add to that and apply the changes. So it comes up here as our first rule. Anything on the green can go to 10, 10, 10, 10 on port 80. Brilliant. After that, the policy is blocked, so anything else is blocked. And then the comment just comes up there. That's the comment that I put in, which is optional. Then we'll go over here and refresh that page, and lo, I can now access that IP address. That's brilliant. So now let's look at ways of making this better. Let's go to firewall groups. And here we can select hosts. In fact, I'll go one back from here. Let's go to the DHCP server and look at the lease that's been assigned to my admin machine. And what I'll do is I'll click add to fixed leases. So this MAC address will get this IP address, and that's its host name, whenever that's requested. So that's fine, that won't change anymore. And you need to do that first, because if you've got a DHCP network and then you're assigning static devices in your firewall, then those devices either need to be static or they need to have a static dynamic lease. I know that seems a bit strange, but it's a lease distributed via DHCP, but it's the same one all the time. So when you've done that, you can go back to your firewall groups and you can select hosts, and you can add that device as a host, and you can put the IP address there. So that's our Windows 10 machine. Let's do the same for our turnkey Linux machine, which is 10, 10, 10, 10. That's static, by the way, so we don't deal with that via DHCP in any way, shape or form in IPFire, because IPFire won't distribute DHCP services. It won't distribute a lot of services to the demilitarized zone, in fact. So we need to deal with everything in that on the orange zone or demilitarized zone manually. So we can put in the name. So this is going to be our web server. And the IP address. And save. Okay, so we've now got two hosts listed here. So we can go back to our firewall rules and we can edit that rule. And what we can say is what we want is the source is our Windows 10 machine, and our destination is our web server, and we can keep the protocol the same, and we can click update and apply changes. And we can just go and refresh that and make sure we can still access it. And to prove that point, I'll just untick that. Oh, that's interesting. Hold on, I'll delete it, sorry. I might have to close that because it's an established rule, 10, 10, 10, 10. Yeah, there we go. So now we've got that forever loop of looking for nothing. So let's go back in and we'll repeat that rule again. We're going to go, our Windows 10 machine can access our web server on TCP 80 and apply, refresh, done. So we can go one step further here as well. We can now, in our firewall groups, we can look at service groups. And now a service group will prevent us from having to do things like, if I want to access the internet here, I'm going to have to select a, for instance, my green network. If I want that to access the internet, I'm going to have to select a rule like this. I'm going to have to say the green network can go to the red network using TCP destination port 80, accept, add, apply, and then I'm going to have to go new rule. The green network can access the red network on TCP 53. Add. Why is that? That's for DNS. I'm going to have to add a new rule there to say that the standard network green can go to red on UDP 53, and then I'm going to make one final new rule to say that the green network can go to the red network using TCP 443. Now look at that nonsense. And that's also, I can go here and go to the internet, because they're the services that are required, or that's the protocols and ports that are required. Okay, so there's a better way of doing that. So let's get rid of all of those. And now, establish rules. It'll fail next time once this is refreshed. Let's go and make a new, is that actually, let me try that again. Yeah, it is broken. So let's go and make a firewall group, service group, and I'll call it LAN access to internet. Doesn't really matter what you call it. And let's just add the required services. DNS TCP, DNS UDP, HTTP, HTTPS. And you know, you may want to add other things such as FTP, mail, IMAP, Active Directory, file shares, POP3 for mail, remote desktop protocols. You know, there's all sorts of things here that you could go into, but we're just looking at the essential requirements to access the internet here. So when we've done that, we go back to our firewall rules and make a new rule and just say that we want anything on the green network to be able to access anything on the red network using a preset service group, LAN access to internet, add. And then we can go back here, waiting, come on, you can do it, there you go. So now I'm on the internet again. So we've got access to our web server locally and access to our internet using sensible rules, and using the firewall groups, such as what we're doing is we're using hosts instead of individual IP addresses, and we're using service groups. So we'll make another service group, and this service group will be incoming web services, because what I can't do at the moment is I can't go out here and access my web server. Now, my web server, that means that what I want to do is I want to be testing from out here, and I want to access this router to come in to a web server on a demilitarized zone. The demilitarized zone's not here, but you can see that there's a web mail server here, and that shouldn't be there. because what we really want to do is take that away from here, that webmail service, and add it to a third network in here, which is our demilitarized zone. Now, to be able to access that from out here, I need to NAT forward a rule from this IP address so that the devices will access this interface either by name, once you've set the DNS up, or by IP address for testing purposes. So we'll do it by IP address. So we need to access the external IP address, not the internal IP address. And so to do that, that means we'll have to go back to our virtual device here and add some rules for that to take place. The rules that we want are HTTP and HTTPS for a secure web server. So that's for our incoming web server. And we want to go to the firewall rules once we've made that group and make a new rule. And the source will be a standard network, red, and will NAT, network address translation, which is a destination NAT or port forwarding rule. And the destination will be a specific host, web server. And the protocol will be a preset service group, incoming web services, add. We can put comments again if we want to. But here's the rule here. Anything coming in on red that is requesting to go through the firewall to the web server on port 80 and 443 can do, and they'll go to that one machine, 10.10.10.10. To test that, then all you need to do is type in the external IP address of IPFire, which is found here. So that's the external address. You cannot access 10.10.10.10 from externally. It has to be NATed, so therefore you need to use the external IP address. So we'll go out here and we'll type in that IP address of our web server. Done. And that concludes the external testing for our web server. So in a nutshell, the firewall rules are done. If you deactivate any rule for testing, it may take a little time, and established rules may already be working. So if I refresh that, it is broken. So or if I try to go to any different page, there's nothing there. I can't do it because it's broken. So I'll go back to my IPFire, turn it back on, apply changes, and then back outside, and it should just work again. I don't have any content in here. I haven't. Oops, hold on. Wait for it. Never mind, I thought I was going mad there for a moment. Right, so now that's only accessing it by IP address, but that's all I really need to do for now because it's sort of outside the scope of what I need to test here. So just to review, the main thing is that we're setting up a static assignment to an administrative machine. We want to make sure that that machine has now got access to the internet. So we'll put that machine and the web server machine as an actual host that we can select for our firewall options. And we've also made two service groups. One service group is incoming web, and the other service group is outgoing web, essentially. And then we've made some firewall rules around that. And look, it's a good idea to add some comments. So for this rule, for instance, if we wanted to have the green, so that's any machine on the LAN accessing the internet, then it's just a good idea to have what do we want? So we want LAN to internet. Just a quick comment there of to describe what's going on, what you're seeing in that particular rule at a glance. So we've got some nice comments there. Our testing, we tested internally, just using the internal IP address of our demilitarized zone server. And we tested access to the internet. And we've also put in the rule so that we can test access from the external. That really wraps up now what I needed to cover for this particular exercise. So I'll go ahead and close off this recording, and I hope you get something out of this video. Until next time, thanks for watching.